You're listening to the Sensuality Project podcast, where the messiness of real life gets sexy, hosted by Stacey Herrera. This podcast is intended for mature audiences only. Episodes contain profane language and topics of a sexual nature that may not be suitable for children. Listener discretion is strongly advised. Welcome to another episode of the Sensuality Project podcast. I am your host, Stacey Herrera. Thank you so much for joining me. It's so sweet of you to be here. I'm so happy. Today I'm chatting with Stasha Washburn, and Stasha is the period coach. Can I just tell you that I love women that ride for periods, like seriously. Any woman that is helping other women to embrace the natural flow is my sister friend. And Stasha is doing the work, and I'm so grateful for women like her who are in the trenches helping the rest of us to elevate our way of being. It's fantastic. In this chat, we cover a lot of terrain. Stasha is a well-read woman. Am I saying that right? Well-read woman? Haha, there's a pun there. I didn't mean to. Well-read, play on words, get it? Anyways, that wasn't intentional, but I'll take it. Yes, Stasha she just knows a lot about a lot of things. And we talk about everything from politics and voting. We talk about Me Too and rape culture. We touch on sexuality and motherhood. Like, it's just great. And you know, one of the things I didn't realize is the conversation starts with us laughing and it ends with us laughing. Like, that's how good it is. This conversation took place before the election, but the information and the dimes that Stasha drops about voting is really important. So you might want to take some notes because it's relevant today and it'll be relative for the next election. So yeah, that. So, okay, I'm going to be quiet now. Okay. So last night I was watching an episode of The Good Doctor. Do you watch that?
I think I've watched one episode thus far.
Yeah, it's one of my, I don't watch very much TV, but that's one of the shows that I really enjoy, mostly because it's got a character that you don't see all the time on television. But last night's episode was a good episode because there was a young woman who had come into the emergency room and was asking for vaginal reconstruction. And of course, the doctor was like, this is not like, that's not an emergency. And she was like, please examine me. And so, of course, they didn't show it. But when the doctor was horrified, and she had asked for this doctor in particular because she is a gynecologist that does specialize in vaginoplasty and genital reconstructive surgeries. But she had been circumcised as a 2-year-old. But that wasn't even, and not that that's not a big deal, but what was really impressive to me about the episode was, it was the first time that I had heard on television, especially in a medical, doctor kind of show, that the doctor was concerned about the woman's pleasure. And that was so impressive to me. So like, have you, and I've mentioned this a couple of times on the podcast, but I personally, even now that I'm 45, I have never had a doctor have a conversation with me about my pleasure. Have you ever had that experience?
Oh, God, no. Wouldn't that be? I think I'd probably faint right then and there and they'd have to resuscitate me.
Right? I think that it's ridiculous. I mean, especially the gynecologist.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like, they never even bring it up. But I was so impressed that I almost fainted on the sofa last night because I couldn't believe, because I have been saying that. Like, no doctor has ever asked me about my pleasure. But then, like, to see it on television and, like, to have, like, her say, it's not just about, like, what it looks like, but she has an opportunity to have a pleasurable sex life in her future. And I was so impressed by that. Do you think that the culture in the middle of the Me Too movement, where that's an important movement, but I think one of the major conversations that's not being had is about pleasure, and not that sexual assault is a pleasurable thing. That's not what I'm saying. I mean that the problem with this conversation is it's so loud and it's amplifying the pitfalls and the dangers of sex, but there's never been a voice to speak about the pleasures of sex and how it enhances, your entire fucking life.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, it's like you're in my mind because I'm working on an article right now that is a little bit of almost a bit of a stroll down memory lane of both the terrible things that have happened, but also the really loving and safe moments that have happened in my own sexual history. And I think that part of that comes from like you said, there's so much of this very justifiable rage in the Me Too movement, and we need to have that anger and we need to have that fuel to make any significant change. But what we also have to have in the conversation is that experiencing that trauma leaves us very numb, leaves us very hard to enjoy ourselves, our bodies, any kind of intimacy. I flinch when somebody touches me as if I'm not expecting it, as I think most women do. I've been working on making that flinch less a flinch and more of a fuck you punch in the face. But we're doing what we can. But we're not going into, okay, so then how do we heal? How do we get back to pleasure, which as a woman, pleasure is really our birthright. I mean, men don't have an organ that has absolutely no purpose but to give pleasure.
Thank you. How genius is that?
Right? So not knowing what it is, what it looks like, how it works in the body. I mean, most women have no idea what it looks like for the female body to be aroused. Like, a penis engorges and lifts, but do you know that the womb also lifts and fluffs up to make some space to have pleasure, or that the clitoris goes around the vaginal canal and that part of that G-spot, A-spot, all of the actual pressure points that are in the vaginal canal can actually be massaging the clitoris as it engorges and becomes larger and encircles the vaginal canal. And we don't even know that about ourselves, or how it works, or how so many different types of orgasms. It's like so many women are just fighting to have one when, oh my God, you could be having several.
Absolutely.
She didn't even know that. And we're missing the follow through. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. There's not one voice that can go through the whole, here's your trauma, here's how your trauma is being presented in the patriarchy, here's the patriarchy causing this trauma, from the big to the little to the everyday. Oh, and here's how you have to deal with your trauma. And okay, now you have to heal that trauma. Oh, and now you have to go have pleasure. And hey, let's have this whole that's too much of a burden for one woman.
Absolutely.
And we need to be having conversations with several different women so that we can have experts from each different part of being a woman, so that you can knit together what it is you need where you are on that road.
I agree. I think that I think one of the biggest disservices that we've done, like as a global culture, is to not have sexual conversations, or to not normalize sexual conversations with our children.
Yes, absolutely. I've talked to a few women who are moms, have kids, and actually do this kind of talks where they, how do you talk to your kids about sex? In fact, one of the women on my summit for this year, I asked her, how do you talk to your kids about this? How do you have a conversation about sex with your kids? And I was blown away that there are actually, first of all, herself, but other women as well. And just knowing that there are women out there that are doing this work, but there's also books, like children's books, that help to have these conversations with your kids, starting from anatomy all the way into consent. And I thought that was just, I don't have kids, so, and that's probably not something that's super on my radar, but I was just like, oh my God, there is a growing force of women, and we need like about 100,000 more.
Right.
But we've got some out there getting it started, which is exactly what we need. So thank God for the pioneers in that world right now.
Absolutely. I have one child, one girl child, and she's a grown up now. And that's the one thing, and I can't say many things that I did right. But the one thing that I can say unequivocally that I did right in her upbringing was that I did normalize the sex conversation. I normalized nudity for her. And I really love the way that she is unapologetically sexual. And I don't know why I did that, but I'm grateful that I did.
I'm sure, like all mothers, you did far more than you think you did. We
I hope
are
so.
our own worst judges when it comes to everything, especially motherhood. But
oh, absolutely. Mothers are definitely the most judged person on the planet. Like that, like ridiculous.
well, there's no winning. You're a bad mom,
Yep.
no matter what you do. I mean, but that's the same as being a woman. I mean, if you have sex, you're a whore. If you don't have sex, you're a prude. There's just
Right. There's no middle ground.
no.
There's no middle ground. And if you and please don't have sex with multiple partners. Like
Oh, God forbid.
Speaking of that, what do you think about what's your perspective on polyamory? And let me give a lens to it. So I lots of things happened yesterday, but so yesterday I was reading an article. And it was on Medium, and I can't remember who the author was, but the person was talking about how a lot of people in the polyamory community online, which is always interesting because for whatever reason, there seems to be an amplification of online things as if the people online don't exist offline, which is crazy to me. But that was the lens that he put it in. Like, that online people that identify or practice polyamory seem to be feeling like they are so judged and so scrutinized and so marginalized that they often compare themselves to minorities experiencing racial discord or prejudice, or the LGBTQ community, and I don't know if there is a real comparison there.
That's a really good question. I mean, okay, so I have friends who are polyamorous. I have friends in the BDS community. I have a lot of what I feel like is insider knowledge without being actually inside. And I am myself bisexual, so I am in the LGBT community, though it's not quite as, prevalent as if I was fully lesbian, because that would be, all the time, just on social media and stuff. But in reality, I am just unbelievably single. So none of this really comes up for me ever.
Right. Well, shout out to single women who are proud to be single, because that's another thing that people get judged for. So there's
super single. I'm always like #super single. The person that eventually wins my hand is going to have to do so much work that I don't necessarily know that it's entirely possible, because I'm so freaking awesome just on my own, doing so well by myself that I'm like, meh. But okay, so that being said, I was with this gentleman in an intimate moment who was, I think he was asking me about polyamory, and he was trying to turn this question into a threesome, basically. He was basically trying to have this conversation in a quote unquote woke manner.
That's
but
so
really
funny.
What he wanted to say is, can we have a threesome? You're bi, right? You're into that. You like women too. And I was like, oh my God, the levels of, okay, hold on.
Right?
First off, what I think so many people miss about polyamory is the last half of that word, amory.
Right.
Love.
Right. I agree.
It is a loving relationship. And just like in the BDSM community or any other community where it's more than just a man and a woman having, or even a same-sex partnership where you just have one other person that you have to navigate a relationship with. But even in that, and in the age of consent, having a very clear conversation before embarking in a sexual encounter, no matter what you are, who you are, and who you're fucking, there's a conversation. This is our rules. These are our boundaries. These are the people in our circle. You can or cannot have sexual encounters with anyone outside of our circle. And maybe you can because that's your community. Maybe you can't because in that community, it's a committed community. But at the end of the day, it's about loving the people in your sexual circle, whether it be a one person or multiple person circle, and being very clear of what is acceptable, what's not acceptable. And in polyamory circles, as well as in BDSM communities, as well in a lot of LGBT, just because of the massive amounts of trauma and just horror that is put upon our LGBT community, Q community. We have to really negotiate, and they all have mentors. There's people who are the mentors in these communities to help you put it together. I have an ex who is a counselor for the BDSM community who sets up the kind of the contract, like, this is what's acceptable. This is the line. This is my red light, my yellow light, my green light signals. They're not just words if I don't have the ability to speak, right? I don't have that ability to communicate. There's always a way to signal green, yellow, red. There's always a conversation. And in the polyamory communities, it's, okay, you don't have to use protection within our community, but if you have sex with somebody outside of it, you must, for the safety of our community. Right? So all of these things are set up before you embark in that first sexual encounter, so that everything is so very clear and consistent, and there is no possibility of blurred lines, gray area, confusion, those kinds of things. And then because of that clarity within the community, it's hard for people outside of it to understand. And I think this might be where that repression or that feeling of racism or sexism or xenophobia or whatever it is comes, because you're misunderstood outside of your culture. Outside of community. Because in your community, you have a mentor, you have counselors, you have people to talk to, you're, at least if you're doing it correctly, you do. And that's the thing that all of these different communities, and this is something that ethnic communities has as well. I mean, I have clients who are of different ethnicities, and they do have mentors and leaders to help navigate in the world that I wish everyone could have. If everyone could have a somebody to talk to have these conversations with, we could be able to see it from other perspectives, have these conversations from other perspectives, and then maybe we wouldn't be in such a shitty place where we don't have empathy or understanding for each other at every level, be it skin color or sexual orientation or preference or gender or kink or sluttiness.
Do you think that the level of insensitivity that seems to be so normal, like so normal, like, do you think that we have done ourselves a huge disservice by making everything broadcastable and therefore desensitizing it for people to the point where compassion is no longer the norm?
I don't think so. In that, when I was growing up before the internet, being dumb was cool. Getting good grades was bad. So it was already in our culture to, the more desensitized you were, the more oblivious you were, the more of a bully you were, the less you cared about other people was a social status. And we've just taken that online.
Yeah, it's and it's amplified. It's amplified because it's like now it's on loudspeaker.
Right. I mean, now you don't have just that one bully in high school or maybe a couple of bullies in school. Now you could get harassed by hundreds of thousands of people at once. But conversely, now you have people that you can go to who do empathize and who do get it and who will help you lick your wounds or even defend you in the world, whereas pre-internet land, you just had to suffer in silence. There wasn't really anywhere to go.
Like, I have to absorb that. I mean, I definitely existed in pre-internet land.
Me too.
I liked it though. I didn't have an appreciation for it at the time, of course, because that was all I knew. I also am very mindful. I'm mindful about my internet consumption, but I'm also really mindful about what I contribute to the internet in terms of my personal life. Like, I'm really guarded about what I share. Even just today, we went to a pumpkin patch yesterday, and I had taken some pictures of and I don't take very many pictures of any experience I'm having actually, but I had taken some pictures of just like pumpkins. And then I had taken some pictures of my sister. She was like moving and being silly, and I had taken a bunch of them. And like right before I posted on Instagram, I thought only the pumpkins are going on here. Like there's like no faces, just the pumpkins, because I'm so, I don't want to be intimate, even though my work is around intimacy, but I don't want to be intimate on the internet.
Oh, see, that's so interesting. I find for myself that the more open that I can be, the more I have women who message me about how much they needed to hear that or see that.
I hear you. I'm willing to be vulnerable, but not intimate.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a time and a place for things. I post far more in my Facebook group than I do, say, on my Facebook page. My Facebook page is far more pictures of like feminist baby books that I'm sending to my grandniece, and less about my own personal moments. But my group is where I think it's needed. We need to have that like safe space. And I posted a video. I actually went in there live this weekend, and it was just a rough weekend. There was a lot going on in my own personal life, and there's a lot going on in the world, and it was all converging into one ginormous storm. And I lived in there with the intention of just reminding everybody in my Facebook group that this is a safe place. And remember, we're all on our own journey of healing, and we all have our stages of grief. And as this trauma and these stories are coming out, we're going to be re-experiencing our own. And can we have this be a space where if you're in the anger stage of grief, you can come in rage, and we aren't like, oh, well, you shouldn't be an angry lady, but rather go get it out, sister. And then if we're in that place of bargaining where you're like, I would give anything to just have this go away, and be like, no, don't give away your power, but rather be like, I see where you are. So I went in there to have this like conversation about like, let's remember that we are all assuming that we're coming from the best place possible when each other are posting, and to hold that space for each other, and blah, blah, blah. And I ended up just crying at the end of it in my own like, and please, I'm so sorry. I was going to try to do this without crying, and I didn't make it. And having that really vulnerable space there. And I get where you're coming from, because the article that I'm working about, that would be more of the intimate part, where I do speak about a little bit about the trauma that I did have, the being hit by men even as early as in middle school, and the reactions of women to it, but then also my own positive encounters with men and that kind of thing. And that is far more intimate. And that for me needs to be not a Facebook Live. That needs to be an article that I run by a few people that I say, is this a space? This is and we're having in that article, there's a conversation about two people who she is saying he raped her, and he's saying I didn't rape her, and I'm saying you're both right.
Yeah. That's so important. I've experienced rape twice. And one of the people I've never addressed it with him. The other person I did, and I think that it's important to note that two people, no matter what the circumstance, can be in the same experience and have two very different experiences. Mm-hmm. And that's also something, because the way that it plays out on social media is that one person is lying, mm-hmm. and never that they both believe their experience.
Yeah. And there are instances of where, to be looking at it from this stance where we're seeing these men go, oh, I didn't even realize I was doing a bad thing at the time. There's a difference between I didn't realize I was doing a bad thing at the time because patriarchy and men own women's bodies and they just had no clue that they could just walk up and grab a woman because whoever told them no before? No one. And that re-education process, there has to be a re-education process, right? So there has to be something for the guys who aren't necessarily horrific men, but need to have serious lessons taught to them. And then the men who, as our own Kavanaugh has shown, cover a woman's mouth because you know you're doing a wrong thing.
Yeah.
You know that you're trying to rape this woman. Otherwise, why would you bother covering her mouth? This is right. So there's certainly instances of, yeah, he did a bad thing and now he's lying about it to cover his ass. And then there's these instances of we were brought up in a world where it was okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
And now it's not. And how do we have that conversation where now it wasn't okay then, but we didn't have that conversation and no one told you, and how would you know?
Right.
But now we're in a situation where now now we have to have this conversation, and how do we do better going forward? And I've gotten messages from guys in the past who were like, I owe you an apology. I didn't know what I was doing at the time. And I have seen the news and I have listened to women's stories and I have talked to women around me, and I realized that I did that to you and I owe you an apology. And I can tell you honestly that I did not know what to say.
Yeah.
I didn't reply for days because I just was like, I don't know what to do with this.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I don't know if that's like, I don't know if I want to say thank you. That's not really what I mean, but I'm glad that they did the work, that they woke up, that they listened, I think, and that's what it comes down to, is that they listened, and I got that apology. And, I got an apology from one guy that was like, I can't even tell you exactly what it is or if there was a moment or anything, but I just know that I owe you an apology.
Yeah. It's so heavy. Like the hardest part for me has been, and not to belittle my own experience or to even come off as insensitive to anyone who's had the experience. But one of the things that has been the most traumatic for me has been the lack of response and support from people when you share it with them. Like, I have yet to have, within my own family, and trying not to throw people under the bus, but I have yet to have anyone in my own family, when I have expressed it out loud, say anything of comfort or express any level of concern. It's been skated over like I didn't even say it.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand.
It's uncomfortable, right?
Yeah, I understand logically and from a whole bunch about psychology perspective. Like, I get it. But from the experience perspective, it is it almost feels as wounding as the experience itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I totally understand that. I've never actually had a conversation with my family because I felt like, first of all, the time that it was happening was already just young, and who knew what, no one knew anything about their own bodies, let alone anything else. And now I'm in this place where I haven't been subject to a violent rape like so many of the women I hold space for have been. And I don't want to, like you said, diminish my own experiences. They have been both violent and sexual, and sometimes in the same place, but I was fortunate enough to be able to get away, to shove my attacker, to put a well-placed knee and run. Mm-hmm. I have been fortunate enough to be able to get away in any of those situations. So, and you just think, okay, great, I survived. I'm going to go home. I'm going to cry for the day. I'm going to take a bath and shower for a couple of hours, and then I'm going to get up tomorrow and go to work. Why bother other people that you love with this and make them feel bad because they couldn't be there or they couldn't protect you or they didn't, I, as a woman, just thought, well, I don't want to make other people feel poorly. Mm-hmm. And I have a support structure. I have friends who have experienced these things, and I can talk to them about that and we can have those conversations. So Like the one thing that I feel every woman needs is a safe place to have that conversation. And then as a human being, when you do talk about these things, and I'll get comments from women that are like, oh, this never happened for me. I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. Congratulations.
Right.
Like, tell me your story. How did you get through life without being groped? I was groped so many times before I even turned 18. I don't even know what that's like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How did you do it? But on the other hand, you're like, okay, great. Well, I don't care. I don't want to hear about that. Like, that's not, well, then I'm not talking to you, am I?
Right.
People to be empathetic and to, at the very least, just say, whew, I see you.
Yeah, yeah. I've never cared about people that I didn't love being empathetic to me, honestly. Like,
no.
But I also have had and still doing, a lot of work around releasing the expectation of a particular type of support from my family.
Yeah.
Look, and in case they're listening, they do love me. Like But that doesn't change my experience,
Right. No, it doesn't. Yeah, it's hard I don't know. It's in a way, it's almost harder to have those intimate conversations with people who are supposed to be intimate.
Oh, absolutely. It's harder. It's so much easier. Well, you don't even have you don't hold back in the same ways with people that don't love you because they don't have power. Like what they can do to hurt you is very limited. Emotionally, compared to, the people who love you, they know where all the buttons are.
Yeah, so true. It's so true. I mean, I think about one of my friends whose blood family is just horrific and useless and terrible and mean and shitty. And, she has built one of the most empowering, amazing communities around herself because of that vacuum. And it still hurts her when she has to deal with them for anything at all in any capacity of support, even if it's just like, hey, can you, watch this, or can you just like give me 10 minutes of silence? Or, I mean, even the most menial requests that in any other family would be like, why are you even asking me this? You don't need to, you don't need to ask this. And they can still cause all kinds of horrific emotional backlash just in responding to a simple question. And I had to, we have to think like, how much power are you going to give somebody, even if they're blood related to you?
Yeah. And there are, and I've had friends who have literally had to divorce themselves, from their families. And what the great thing about like this whole human thing is that even though it, you can find a million reasons to think that humans are shitty, right? Like, but this is the upside is there's so many of us that when you have to discard, and if you want to call it that, a group of shitty humans, you can always discover a group of amazing ones. To fill in the space, like people that have had like issues with where they had to, for whatever reason, they weren't connected with their mother. And then they have these amazing stories of all the mothers they've had in their lifetime, like, so it's such a symbiotic,
yeah.
You know what I mean? That there will always be something or someone to fill in the spaces. Now, they can't occupy the space in the same way, but,
right.
But there is always someone or something that can fill in the spaces. And sometimes we don't always recognize that that's true.
You're just saying that reminds me of two things. One, the moms that go to like the pride parades with T-shirts that say "Mom hugs free."
Look, that gave me goosebumps. Go on.
Right? Because yes. So many of the LGBT community is disowned by their parents.
Absolutely.
And homeless and on their own from very young ages, surviving and having a mom hug. There's just nothing on the planet that's the same as a mom hug. And the moms that go and do that are just... they get it, they get that lack and that thing. And the other thing that reminds me of is how many times I've rented my own mother out to my friends who had really shitty moms.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know, call my mom. She's an awesome mom. Here's her number. Call her. She will be a great mom for you. She will give you awesome mom advice.
Look, I love your mom. Like,
oh yeah. And she did it too. I'd be like, Mom, so-and-so is going to call you. They're having this, breakup or whatever. And they need a mom. And my mom was like, okay, great.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing that, and for whatever reason, there are some people that are just not wired, for that kind of connection. Like some people that are capable of reproduction are not capable of the nourishment that offspring often require.
100%.
And it's unfortunate, yeah, I mean, again, I'm trying not to tell too much of my own story. So, but even still, like then at the same time, like, and I think people struggle, and I know I've struggled with reconciling the fact that, that even if it was shitty, that was the best the person had to offer. And that might not have been enough for you.
Yeah.
That, because people will tell you, oh, no, they did the best that they can. Okay. And the best that they had wasn't enough for me. Like, so there's this, it can be this, a real hard, sometimes it feels really cavernous to be in that space because, there's the camp that needs you to be almost forgiving, even if you don't feel like it, for your experience. And then the other people who want you to just, to not be upset about what you felt like you missed.
Yes. So much of life is Schrodinger's cat.
Yeah.
Two things can be true at the same time, and it doesn't take away from the other person's experience. It doesn't make that anyone wrong. Your truth is true. This truth is also true. And this hurt both of us in different ways for different reasons, and it's still true.
Yes. It's such a thing. I think that dueling perspectives is what gets us in these tight spaces. I think that's what creates the tension in almost every social activist experience right now. That's the tension line right there.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm afraid of you, and you didn't do anything. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah.
Yes, you have the right to love whoever you want to. And for whatever reason, that makes me uncomfortable. That's, I think, the tension line in almost every argument. Like, I can't, that's usually it, is that there's these opposing experiences and the inability to accept the other person's experience, even if it's not yours or you don't agree with it.
And there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear and just non-education. There's a lot of miseducation. There's lots of just, if you think about the propaganda of every marginalized person on the planet, it's horrific. It's lying flat out. But people believe it because they don't know any better, because that's all they were taught their entire lives. And there's just no education. There's no, we devalue education and information in favor of emotionally charged conversations that don't have any actual facts in them. And that fear-based, uneducated, just believing what's put in front of you is the cause of so much of that tension, because that's a life where everything is black and white. There's right and wrong, and there's no in between.
Absolutely. Do you think that the education or the intelligence that's missing is the actual emotional intelligence, though?
See, and I think that's a really good question, because it's a very emotional place to be in when you don't have any facts, and you just are making decisions based on emotion, but it's not an educated emotion. Right? You don't know those are the feel. It's like you're a toddler and you're angry, but you don't know what your emotions are yet. So you're throwing a tantrum because you don't know how to explain frustration.
Absolutely. And when that's what's been modeled for you, you know, like when all you've ever seen is people either numbing out or expressing anger, which is never what's the real problem. Anger is a secondary emotion. So, no one's ever angry for the sake of being angry.
Right.
Usually it's something underneath, but when you are not used to feeling and processing, all you know is you're pissed off and now you want to throw shit.
Right. And now you're talking about our numb first lady and our temper tantrum throwing president.
Oh, yeah. He's definitely a high chair tyrant.
The two perfect examples of either numbing yourself out or throwing tantrums because you don't understand what's happening.
Absolutely. Well, and then too, this administration is such an important example of why everyone needs someone in their life to tell them the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they don't like it. Because a lot of people run amok simply because everyone has, even if people disagreed, they just nodded and kept quiet, as opposed to saying like, okay, I'm going to stop you right there. You full of shit right now.
Yeah, we do. And that goes back to that community having a safe place to think out loud where people can go, oh no, you need to, that's not, change the end of that sentence. That's the terrible, but so that you can think it out loud, so that you can have that conversation, because you have to process your emotions somehow. And the only way to have emotional intelligence is to have conversations with people.
Right.
The problem is the listening part of the conversation that we're having a hard time with our examples in the world, because they're not capable of listening. So a lot of our country has no idea how to listen because they've never seen it modeled for them.
Right. And so many people go into any conversation and the only thing they really care about is being right. So even if they can hear something, which is different than listening, they are never hearing or listening for understanding. They're listening for their way in to promote their rightness.
Oh, God, I can't tell you how much I hear this just working with women in periods, because they want a place, and I get it, I did too. You just want a place where you can bitch about how bad it is for you, how bad your period is, how bad your whatever is, right?
Yeah.
No, and nobody wants to hear, well, it could actually be helpful to you if you changed your viewpoint, because that's, first of all, cultural conditioning is that your period is disgusting and taboo and shameful and embarrassing, and you should be hyper vigilant because God forbid you bleed through anything ever, anywhere, ever. Your life is ruined. You're disgusting. And you need some sweet smelling chemicals that's going to throw your whole body out of whack, fuck up your hormonal balance even more, and give you a yeast infection and a bacteria infection. But that's better than you smelling like a woman. You're gross.
Right.
So you have to unpack all of that to be able to see that there's any kind of positive to having your cycle. And it's hard to go from being in this space that you've spent your entire life in, where you've only heard this one viewpoint and you've only lived this one emotion, to opening up your ears and heart and womb enough to go, well, maybe that's not all terrible. And it's hard. It's hard to do that. It's hard to do that with any situation. It's hard to take somebody who's uber religious and believes marriage is one man and one woman and go, well, maybe not everybody has to do that. Right. Like it's hard to take that. And just because I work with women in menstruation, that's where I see it all day, every day. And I know in my own business, I can't go out there and be like, hey, ladies, periods are cool. Because they're like,
right.
No, they're not. Get the hell out of here, crazy lady.
Yeah, when they're like, oh, but my back is fucking hurting and I'm throwing up and I still have to go to work. Right,
exactly. And I'm like, I get it. I traded Vicodins so that I could get to work in that exact place. I understand where you're coming from 100%. But also, yes, that's true. And there's actually messages in there that are good for you. And it's hard to have that yes and conversation in my world, which is why I get it in all of these other aspects, because both things can be true at the same time.
Absolutely. This episode of the Sensuality Project podcast is brought to you by Sensual Moon, a blueprint for intentional living. The period, as I mentioned at the start of this episode, I believe that the period is a blueprint for your entire life. As a woman, you can use your menstrual cycle to navigate the terrain of every area of your life. And that's why I created Sensual Moon. And Sensual Moon is a how-to system designed for the woman that is ready to take life to the next level. It's a 3-part digital system that includes the blueprint, which explains the menstrual cycle. It has details about each phase of the cycle. It also has rituals and playlists and a whole bunch of other juicy stuff. It also includes the daily tracker so that you can keep track of where you are at any phase of your cycle, an intention setting guide, and a bonus self-date planner, because every woman should be dating herself, right? Anyways, this is for you. If you want to experience alignment in life, love, and business, if you want to practice real self-care by getting in tune with the feminine, or you just want to follow the guidance and wisdom and intuition of your own body, hello. You can download your copy of the Sensual Moon Digital Blueprint for Intentional Living at StaceyHerrera /Sensual Moon. And if you enter code TSP for the Sensuality Project, you can save 25% today. Because who doesn't want to save 25%, right? Absolutely. Yeah, we've got a lot of, I was going to say we've got a lot of growing to do, but it's also true that we're not supposed to all be woke at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're not. Like, there is no growth. If we all were there, what would we be doing here?
Yeah.
And even, like now, one of the things I see a lot of is people excommunicating anybody that has anything good or is on the side of Trump. That they're like, if all Trump supporters unfriend me, or, it's on the dating apps. Like, if you're a Trump supporter, swipe left. You know what I mean? Like, I recently was at a friend's house, and I'm bookish, so I love to look at people's bookshelves. And this particular person had every fucking Trump book that everyone. And they said to me, people feel some kind of way about that. Do you have something to say? And I was like, no, I'll say I'm not surprised, but that's all I got. Like,
were you like, just so you know, Trump didn't actually write any of these books?
Oh, I did mention that, by the way. I did say that. Yeah, like that didn't happen. But I was like, it's fine. And, they argued that even whether you are a supporter or against him, that you should educate yourself about him. And I said, no, thank you. And that was the end of it. Like, I don't, like, I can still be your friend if you feel like he's doing great things. That's not the experience I'm having, but that's okay. That's the experience that you're having.
Yeah, I have some friends that were conservative Republicans and actually have contacted me and said, I really apologize. I voted wrong. And I didn't. You told me at the beginning of this that this guy was a racist and that he was going to roll back the rights for all of the marginalized people in our country. And I said, no, he's going to help my business grow. And then he gave a bunch of tax breaks to a bunch of rich people. And now my business is going to be really tough next year with the new tax laws. And I've just seen so many protections for people rolled back, and you were 100% right on all of that, and I am sorry. And I was like, you don't have to apologize to me. You did what you thought you thought you were making a fiscally responsible choice, even though all of the data over decades have shown that the Republicans always put us into a freaking debt situation. But aside from logic and facts, fine. But go vote better next time, and maybe read some, economic reports before you make what you think is a fiscally conservative choice when it's not.
Yeah.
But that's okay. I have absolutely unfriended some people. I live on Facebook for my business. I have my Facebook group that's free for people to join. I have my membership group that's a paid Facebook group. I have an a food and flow for hormonal balance. It's a paid program group. And then I also am a business coach. So I have some business coaching groups. So like I live on Facebook. It's my business. And I was like, I cannot go on to do my work every day and have to see like people posting about how hilarious it is that Trump just made fun of a retarded person, or Trump just made fun of a rape victim, or any of the other million kajillion things that, they're laughing because it's funny to them. And I find it mean, and it breaks my heart. Like, it doesn't just make me angry. It also makes me horrifically sad.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't do this. I can't live like this. So I was like, I'm sorry, I'm unfriending all of you. I didn't block anybody, but I unfriended all of them. But I did keep my Instagram and my Twitter. I kept everybody because I thought, well, I need to know what's going on. Like, I need to know what the other perspective thinks and says and is doing. I can't spend all day in it either, because I will kill myself.
Yeah.
Out of just sadness. But yeah, I had to protect myself in one space, at least. And then I had a Twitter troll. I had one individual human being who actually, he spent almost a year commenting on anything that I posted about equal rights for women, feminist stuff, which is, simply just that we are all humans and we should all have the same rights regardless of anything, which I know is a tough concept for a lot of people. But I anytime I would post anything about women having equal rights, he would troll me, and I left him on there. And I got so many messages from people who were like, you can just block him, right? And I was like, no, this is good. You should see this. You should see me post something like, hey, let's confirm the protections against women. And, he'd be like, women don't need special protection. They're fine. They're equal, blah, 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 blah. And then I would leave it there, and I would, and then like another troll or something would see it because, he comments on it. So then like his people see it. And then they would comment on it, and I would be like, no, this is good for all of us to see this. It's good for you as a woman who may or may not be voting, let's say, who live in a bubble where you've blocked everybody. And you might not feel so motivated to call your senators or make sure that you're still registered to vote, because voting polls are being wiped out in many states right now, and people are being purged from the register. So you need to make sure that you're still registered to vote, even if you have been for decades, and you need to go do that. But you might not be as inclined to do that if you live in your own bubble and you don't think other things are or don't know other things are happening out there.
Well, so the bubble is how we got here, and that's why Trump is important. Like, I'm not a fan of him, but we needed him because for as long as I've been Black, it's been a bubble.
Right.
So it was necessary, because there were people that were really delusional, because if it's not something that you actually have to experience, it's very easy to think it doesn't exist.
Right. I mean, okay, so Black Lives Mattered, and I am an avid football fan and have been supporting Kaepernick's Take a Knee movement since the very beginning of it. And I thought, like, oh, awesome, this is great. We're going to have a real conversation about race in this country. But we didn't really we still were watching our kids really get mowed down by white cops who just were like, hey, he was a Black kid, so I, felt threatened and murdered him. It's fine. I'll get a slap on the wrist and be back at work in a month. Like, it didn't change. And now I don't know that it's changing. It's not changing yet, but I see your point where it's like, well, but now we're having this conversation in a far larger way. And I see more of my white friends having those conversations, like the Kaepernick conversation, right? I'm a woman who watches football religiously. This is not like, there's not a large group of progressive, working with periods, feminists, worked on the Obama campaign in 2008, worked on Equality California for gay marriage in 2008. There's not a lot of me that are like every Sunday sitting at the bar, drinking beers, doing shots of Jamesons and screaming at the TV. But but you're filled in those bars with people who think, Kaepernick's a traitor and he should just stand up and this and that and the other. And I had so many conversations about it. And then the whole Trump election happened and all of those conversations. And I was like, can you see now that racism is alive and well in this country? Can you see Charlottesville? Can you see that the KKK exists today and it is being institutionally sanctioned to murder our Black, brown, and can we even start the conversation about the indigenous in this country? Like, come on. And it, you know what? The bar full of people that I have changed their tunes because of it. So, if there's at least one of me in more bars worldwide having this conversation, and now Trump is actually making it so blatantly obvious that you can't not. I mean, you just really have to show a picture and be like, this is happening right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely not a fan or a supporter of Trump, but there is a really large part of me that's grateful that he's in office because we needed an asshole to smoke out the assholes. Like,
I get it. As much as I have Hillary Clinton's, there's a book, The Revolution is Female by Kristen Blush, who did all of those photos of Hillary on the campaign. And as much as that book lives on my desk and I look at it and I go, oh, Madam President, what I wouldn't give for you right now. There's another part of me that's like, well, at least this is forcing conversation.
Absolutely. Because for so long, a lot of people's stance on everything was, I don't talk about race, I don't talk about politics, and I don't talk about religion. And finally, we are in a position where it's unavoidable most of the time. I mean, there are still people that are saying that because I've heard them. And every time I hear it, I'm like, you know what? That's the most ridiculous shit I've ever heard. Like, that's the reason that we've gotten here this long with this same bullshit is because people have wanted to close their eyes and pretend it doesn't exist. But thankfully, the Cheeto guy can't keep his fucking mouth shut. And because of it, people are being forced to open their mouths.
It's true. It's true. It's true. I mean, I can fully admit that I've always been outspoken as far as feminism and LGBTQ rights are concerned because I can claim those things. I'm in those families and households. And I have had so many religious fights because while I don't believe in organized religion, I have literally been stalked by somebody who followed me telling me to walk in the light of Jesus because I was a whore. And this was high school and I couldn't go between classes without this guy following me and calling me all kinds of names in the name of Jesus. So I've been very anti-religion most of my life. And I very clearly can see how religion gets us into these places where you have to be right or, so I've been very outspoken about those things. And, I've just never really felt like it was my place to speak about minority rights. I'm not a minority and God, I'm going to say something and I'm going to just get freaking trashed for saying the wrong thing. And people are going to think I'm not a supporter and I am a supporter. I want everyone to have equal rights for everything all of the time. But God, I'm going to say the wrong thing. And yeah, I mean, as much as I have tried and I've always, I talked about this openly last year for my summit. I wanted to have more women of color, but there were just not a lot of women of color that I could find doing work in the menstruation field. There's not a lot of women doing the work in the menstruation field. Period. Pun intended.
Right.
Let alone women of color doing it. And I realized that problem is because in my world, unless you're a doctor, it's really very hard to make a living doing what I'm doing. And I'm not a doctor, and I know that because I'm having, it's hard to make a living doing what I'm doing.
Look, I understand.
Right? So how
it's
much harder is that for a woman of color to do
on
top of everything else, right?
Really fucking hard. And it's interesting because I've had that conversation with, I've got plenty of, personal development coachy friends that aren't Black. In fact, the majority of my coachy personal development friends aren't Black. But to have a conversation with a white woman where I say as a Black woman, it's harder. And they're like, but no. I'm like, you don't understand.
But yes.
It is harder. It's harder for a couple of reasons. Even speaking to my own community, one of the challenges is that it's been so long that we've been marginalized and that we've not had access to certain things, that we're so used to trying to do things ourselves. So like that whole Black women are strong thing, like that's like a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a real fucking thing, and we don't have to say shit, but we've been struggling to tape and glue and piece ourselves together for so long that it's very difficult for us to even say, I need help. And then to say, now I have to find the money to do it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. It's one of those things that where, as a white woman, I didn't feel comfortable speaking out, and now I just would much rather support other women who, like yourself, who should be speaking out and having a larger platform. And while I don't have a huge platform, I'm super happy to pimp anybody that I can that has something good to say that will further the conversation. Just as I'm happy when I get pimped by anyone who has a larger platform to continue the conversation around menstruation. I mean, when I started my business program, right? So I have a program for women in business to run your business with your menstrual cycle. I truly believe that we need more women in business. More women need to be making money. If more women have money, then more women will have power, because that's just how it works in our society right now. And so I also know from experience and clients and life that as women, trying to run your business like a dude does not work.
Absolutely not.
I mean, you can, but it bleeds your soul, your hormones, your adrenals, everything dry. And you end up a husk of a woman instead of trying to be a man, instead of a juicy, curvaceous, luscious, moist, can I say, beautiful woman who is making good money and helping other women. So one of the things that I did when I set up my membership program, Your Business, Your Flow, literally running your business with your flow, was to say, okay, so we're going to have a space, a scholarship, a pay what you want. I don't care. And it'll probably change and evolve as it grows, but for women of color, because not every woman of color is going to be able to afford this, because they're making less money. And the people in my program are women running businesses, which means they're working with women generally. And the women of color are almost always working with women of color, which makes it even harder for them to make money.
Absolutely.
Right? So how do I help women make more money if they can't afford to learn how to make more money? And that just leaves us as women in a loss, because we're not getting the voices that we could be getting. So
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've put together something that I think is a start. And I looked at a woman of color who has her own membership program, who does a sliding scale thing. And I was like, okay, great. So let's do that. And incorporating, individual, like just marginalized women in general.
Yeah. No, it's so important. It's so important. Like right now, I'm really giving serious consideration to going back to school to get my psychology degree, just because one of the major reasons that Black people do not get mental health help is because there's not enough Black mental health practitioners. And part of it is because we have been conditioned to mistrust other cultures because of the way that we've been treated, that when it comes to something so close to the heart as your mental health, a lot of Black people will not go see someone that's not Black.
Right. And that makes sense too, because like we were talking about earlier, there's mentors in all of these different communities. You need to have somebody who gets it.
Yes, absolutely. It's really important. So thank you for creating space, because, Black women will pay for help. Like, it's just that they sometimes can't afford to. I mean, sometimes it literally is, but I need to make groceries. Or the light bill is due. And as much as I would love to take care of my heart right now, I need to make sure that we're not eating in the dark tomorrow. Like those are like real, choices that people are faced with. And it's not something that's often spoken about. And so, there are a lot of opportunities that just that haven't been, taken just because affordability creates a gap.
Yeah. And I'm going to be honest with you right now. The women in my program in that scholarship position are just in there for free right now because it's a real thing. They've got multiple kids. They're pretty much, some of them are on their own. Some of them are not on their own. Some of them should just be on their own. It would probably be cheaper, but
yeah.
But we've all had those significant others that just drained our accounts dry.
Yes.
But yeah, it's, I was like, but if we don't have that space for it, then how do we create change if we don't, and look, at the end of the day, there's things that we can do better. There's things that we can do. I'm sure there's things that as myself and my business grows, we'll have to change and make better. And somebody will, hey, you could do this. And that would be even more in alignment in practicing what you preach. And I will probably be like, oh my God, how did I not even think of that? So, I hope to have an open dialogue. I hope to be able to have that conversation where, somebody could say, this would be an even better way for you to practice what you preach. And if I'm practicing lifting up women, how do I do that? Like, if that's what I'm preaching, how do I do it? How do I practice it? So,
well, that's the great thing about, like, this is, regardless of what CNN says, this is truly the best time to be alive. Because what's available to us has never been available. Like, this dialogue could not have happened 50 years ago.
No.
You know what I mean? I mean, aside from the fact that the internet didn't exist, but even beyond that, like, these conversations wouldn't be happening. And there definitely would not have been the acknowledgement of the disparity because that's what's been in the way for a really long time. There was just no acknowledgement of the disparity because the story is that, people didn't want it or they weren't interested or whatever the story was. But like now there is the disparity is being acknowledged, and that's the only way we can fill those spaces or, create bridges and create opportunities and have sliding scales and welcome people even if they can't afford it. Like, those things can only be happening now. So I'm so grateful. As hard and as challenging as it is sometimes, it is equally vast and luscious, and there is so much available to us. Not all at once. Like it's not available all at once.
Nope.
but it is available. And now, thanks to the convenience and of technology, we now are able to have conversations across not just state lines and like clearly like on the other side of the world. Like, we're crossing date lines now. You can talk to the past, like you can talk to the future in the same moment.
Oh yeah.
Like this is a really rich time, even with ridiculous people in holding public office. They say even a broke clock is right twice a day. So I don't know if that's ever been truer.
I know. I see on the state levels and the county levels and those small levels, I see the people who are running now, and they never would have run had we gotten our female president into the office. So yes, I've been in politics, and I know how important those local politics are for people on a real every day-to-day basis, even more so than, say, voting for the president. And
absolutely.
I've been, since I was 18, trying to convince my friends to vote for more than just who's going to be president, but to vote at those smaller levels and to get involved in politics on a more local level. So and it's happening now.
Yes.
And it wasn't happening. I felt like I was just, yelling into the void for so very long. And now people are going, oh crap. Like, now when votes come up, so I'm still registered to vote in Los Angeles, though I'm a digital nomad and I'm kind of everywhere all of the time. But I still get people from LA who will message me and be like, okay, so how are you voting for this, like these elections and this and that and the other? And coming down to the very little bits of like, who's going to be your local sheriff? Because you could have a man who wants to just jail all of the black boys as sheriff if you're not voting.
Absolutely, because that's where
how
your
you end
voice
up.
is really counts, is in your own neighborhood.
Right. That's how you end up with these horrific police cultures, because you're not voting at that level. And so there's nobody running that wants to make any kind of change. And it's just that same old, same old. And you've got that old boys culture, and they're not putting women on the force, and they're sending, all of the white cops into the Black communities. And it's just, whereas you could be electing somebody who wants to actually make some kind of change and actually help people. And you have that choice, and that matters in that situation. And you can't change that by voting for the president. The president doesn't have control over who your local sheriff is.
Exactly. I'm like, this is such a timely conversation because elections are coming. And yeah, so it's so important. It is.
It is.
And I have said that too to people. Like, if you don't vote if you're not down with the electoral college, I get it. Then don't fucking vote for president. But don't skip the ballot that appoints the people in your community.
Yep.
Like, don't skip the measures that are going to impact the way that you live in your own house.
Exactly. And if you need to, have friends and everyone take a different part. I mean, my last ballot took me weeks to research all of the different people and places, because so many people were running, right? Because of Trump, because of this whole thing. There were so many people running this time, and I wanted to make good choices. And it took me weeks to put that ballot together. And I tell you, next time I am calling a couple of my girlfriends, and I'm going to be like, you take these ones, you take those ones, I'll take these. And then we'll come together and we'll exchange notes and what we came up with and why we're making this choice. And then we'll just compare notes and make this a little
That's
easier
a great idea. That's a great idea, because you can't rely on the stupid mailers. Like, because that's a lot of times that's what people are really basing their choices on.
Oh no,
just what vote no on this. It said so. I got the thing in the mail. Like, no, you got to do your research.
No, and I'm in Arizona right now. I'm in Sedona, Arizona, this little pocket of liberalism in a crazy red state. And I'm watching. I was watching the football game yesterday, and there's all these ads on there that are just attack ads against each other. And I'm watching these from a little bit of an insider perspective, but I'm watching these going, wow, that is an amazing way to make this person look like a horrific human being. Wow. But then you can turn around and you see their opposing candidates and going, oh my God, that's just I don't know who I would vote for, because they're both terrible right now. And how do you make that choice? And I don't know. And then there are candidates like Beto in Texas, who's not running, smear campaigns against Cruz. He's kind of just letting Cruz do his own smear campaigns for himself, frankly, which I think is a very smart political move in that space. But I mean, I'm sure if you're there and you're seeing the ad campaigns, I'm sure it's ugly. So you can't look at the propaganda.
No, you can't.
You have to find some way to make a choice that's objective. It's hard.
It is. It's really hard, especially because, everyone has the overwhelm story is I don't have time. I don't have time to be researching. I got to go to work tomorrow. I got a promotion to be trying to get, or I got a paper that I need to write, or I have back to school night tomorrow, whatever, everyone can have the story about it, about not having time. But if you have time to pay higher taxes, if you have time to be harassed on the street, if you got to make time, because not making time can really impact your life.
Well, not making time is how we ended up in this situation.
Exactly.
This is how we ended up with a Republican Senate, House, presidency, judicial branch. There's so much imbalance of power because these people got elected at the local levels and they gerrymandered everything into their favor. They put judges at the local levels that would support their gerrymandering decisions. I mean, that a lot of this is because of the local level politics. That, there's parts of Pennsylvania where you have to vote 6-1 in order for a Democratic nominee to actually get a position because of the gerrymandering that has been done in that state. One Republican vote equals 6 Democratic votes.
Wow.
Just how much, and And to be fair, they're attempting to fix it, and I don't know what's going to happen. It's not my state, so I'm not paying too careful of attention, though it is my birthplace. But yeah, I mean, but that's true of a lot of places where it's like a 2-to-1 vote or a 3-to-1 vote, because it's been done at the state level, it's been done at the local level, and you have to be involved at that level, or you end up in a situation where districts are calling in where you can win the presidency with 3 million votes and still lose.
Right, exactly.
And that's local level politics, because they put the people in at the local level and they had the judges appointed at the local level that would agree with them, so that now you have to have more. It's not a 1-to-1 vote. So even those jokes of like, hey, should we go to the poll and I'll cancel you out and you cancel me out, are not true, because if a Republican goes and votes, that doesn't cancel out your Democratic vote. And your Democratic vote does not cancel out that Republican vote. 6 of you need to vote, cancel out that one. So people don't realize that. People don't know that. And that's another one of the problems, is we're not voting at the state level because people think their vote counts for a vote. And says it doesn't. Sometimes it only counts as half a vote or a third of a vote or a sixth of a vote.
Which is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
It's ridiculous. This is so good. This is so good. Like, we talked about so much. We covered a lot of ground. This is great.
Oh, we did cover a lot of ground.
This is great. I've got one more question that is not even about what we've been talking about, but it's relevant.
Great.
What's your favorite way to be taken care of post-sex?
Oh. Food. A good meal, a ridiculous snack, hot cup of tea or hot chocolate or something while I wait. But like a good hearty meal. I'm also the kind of girl that doesn't like to go to dinner and then go home together. I'm all like, let's have sex first.
Yes.
And then eat and stuff ourselves silly, and then just lay here and bask in our orgasmic stuffed bliss.
Oh, yes. I love that.
Yeah. So I'm, my blood should be working in my genitals for my orgasm time. And then it can move my stomach afterwards for a nice meal.
Absolutely. Because digestion is a lot.
Digestion is important. That's, like, you don't screw with my sleep. You don't screw with my meals. If you, I sleep. And if you are somebody who's going to mess with my sleep, you're out.
Right.
And if you are, like, I don't want anyone to mess with my meals either. Like, I want to eat a good meal and then I want to rest and digest.
Mm-hmm. I am here for it. I love that.
I think a good meal is the best way to really win my heart after you've won my orgasm.
That's perfect. I don't think anyone has ever said that.
No?
No. I always ask the same question because endings matter so much.
They do.
Endings matter, but people have said food, but never quite so eloquently, and I concur.
Yeah, I tell you what, there's been, I have, as I said, super single. So I have a few gay people in place in various parts of the world that are kind of my regular go-to orgasm partners. Mm-hmm. And I do have to say, like, the first time that I have this conversation where I'm like, no, come on over. Let's have sex. Let's have dinner. Let's enjoy the evening for sure. And then they're like, okay, great. Well, do you want to just meet at the restaurant? And I'm like, no, I meant it in that order. Let's have sex. Then let's have dinner. And then maybe later, after we've rested and digested, we can do it again. I don't know, but let's start with the orgasm.
Yes, no, I agree, and I might have to restructure some things.
I mean, when you start looking into the research, it's really what makes the most sense for you as a woman's absolute best orgasms.
It really does. I've always I've refrained from alcohol if I know I'm going to have sex, but it didn't even occur to me. Usually I'm not jumping up and down immediately following food, but but it does. It makes perfect sense because digestion takes a lot of energy.
It does.
more than almost anything else. It takes a lot of energy, and food comas are real. So I'm on board with that.
It does. And I enjoy that, having a meal afterwards and being able to go, that thing was phenomenal that you did. You should try that again sometime. Or just having a conversation, like what's been going on in life, in the universe, how's this or that or the other. And that connection time with somebody, which I think is so important. And regardless of their commitment to you, let's just say, doesn't change the fact that if you are having sex with somebody, even if it's regularly, a couple of times a year, even, it's nice to have that like time afterwards to just connect and have a conversation and maybe throw in this was awesome, do that again. Cause that's, the key to good sex is communication.
Absolutely.
And sometimes in bed is a hard time to have those conversations.
It's not where you should have them, actually.
No, it's not. It's not. And I have to say, I went out with this guy recently who, before we so much as kissed, like we had just met, we were just, watching the moon rise and drinking some wine and just getting to know each other. And he was asking me questions about, sex and, what are some of the things that you prefer or don't like, or, where are some of your boundaries and where are some of your lines? And then after we made out a little bit, he was like, okay, no, but for real now, we do have to have these conversations. Where are your lines? And I was like, we're not even in bed yet. I was like, well, here's one. I'm not going down on you until you go down on me, because I don't do that. You're going to have to do some work. And he was like, oh, great to know. I would be happy to go first. It's just, having those conversations beforehand are really important. And then having those conversations afterwards. And this is where I'm like, a good meal is just like the perfect time to do it. So you just sit back and have something to eat and be like, yeah, that was fantastic. I really enjoyed that. And maybe we should try this next time. And you can kind of have some space from it, which I think is important in keeping that line of communication open.
I agree. Well, that's genius. Of course, you've got a genius closing.
Yes, I've won the day.
The Sensuality Project is produced, edited, and hosted by me. Music by bensound.com. The Sensuality Project podcast is a production of StacyHerrera.com.